It took me 3 years to finish Persona 4, not because I found it difficult or because I found it to drag, but because every time I booted up the game, it felt like I was going on vacation to visit my second family, and that was never a feeling I wanted to lose. But now I'm curious, where did this sense of nostalgia come from? Well, to work that out, I really need to fill you in on what this franchise is. Persona is a JRPG franchise developed by Atlus, heavily focused on building up bonds and new beginnings. It's a series I didn't actually discover until fairly recently through Persona 5. You see, none of the individual stories in this franchise are directly linked, despite the numbers in the titles. And with its heavily stylized and quite frankly gorgeous art style and story, Persona 5 very quickly became my favourite game of all time. And to this day, it remains one of my favourite games of all time. But while I loved every aspect of P5, I always struggled to relate to its message and story. Don't get me wrong, there are some really heavy-hitting tones, and I always felt their impact, but I never lived in the city and I never felt the need to rebel against those older than me, so the story just never sat with me as much as it has for others. The game I could relate to, released just 8 years prior. I started Persona 4 Golden on February 9th, 2021, the day after my 17th birthday, where I had received a Steam download code from a cabbage connoisseur. It was here, sitting at home during my online college lecture, that I was welcomed by a familiar face.
Ah, it seems we have a guest with an intriguing destiny.
See, at this point I was still in my phase of thinking Persona 5 was the greatest piece of fiction I'd ever experienced and nothing was ever going to top it. And this was actually my first time playing anything related to the series since my playthrough of P5, so being in the different yet familiar Velvet Room felt already nostalgic. Looking back on my first time opening the game though, it was honestly the strangest feeling I had over the 3-year playthrough. And I think that's because I was alone.
I came for Goofy! I did not come for...
This is Laz, the previously stated cabbage connoisseur, and honestly the reason I'm here doing any content stuff right now. You see, instead of playing through the game the traditional way, we instead made a little habit of hopping into a Discord call and playing about 1 to 2 hours of what he was calling his favourite game of all time. Sometimes this would be every night for a couple of weeks, and sometimes I wouldn't open the game for a few months. Deciding not to play a huge bulk of this game alone is definitely the main contributor to it taking almost 3 years to complete. But I wouldn't trade my experience with Persona 4 for any traditional one. Instead of reading the unvoiced lines in my head, we'd put on the voices to the best of our abilities. Instead of monotonously grinding levels in silence, I had company. And because Laz had recently played through the game himself, anytime I started to work out the mystery in the story, he'd throw me off the trail entirely, which kept almost every twist in this 15-year-old game a genuine surprise. And yes, you want to keep this game a surprise. As previously mentioned, this game builds a lot of its story on mystery, and relies heavily on you not knowing the answers. So before I properly delve into what makes Persona 4 so great and comforting to me, I definitely need to instate a spoiler warning. I couldn't recommend this game enough, so what I'm going to tell you now is to click off this video, save it to your watch later, put the link somewhere else, or hell, never come to it again. I don't mind, but please, do yourself a favour and play Persona 4. But before you disappear, have you ever tried fighting Sans on your phone? Because I have. Click the link in the corner to find out how that goes and a little bit more about everyone's favourite skeleton. Persona 4, same for every other mainline game in the series, follows an unnamed protagonist. This time he's shipped away from home to a rural town in Japan called Inaba, where he's forced to spend a year meeting new people, developing bonds, and searching for the truth in life. A blank slate character plays incredibly well for the Persona series. Allowing you to put yourself into the role of the protagonist in a game so heavily focused on friendship is truly genius, and works wonders for the game's world building. Shortly after arriving to Inaba, a string of murders start popping up throughout the town. This case surrounding a strange midnight TV channel is what awakens you to your persona. And here's where the RPG is injected into this life sim. The Midnight Channel is introduced to the player as an urban legend, a conspiracy that at midnight when it's raining, the TV will show the viewer their soulmate. But it's through this legend that the clues to the story are presented to us. In actuality, the channel mirrors the collective human consciousness. It reflects the innermost thoughts and insecurities of the individual it targets, and we're later shown that TVs function as an entrance to a mysterious world where people face versions of themselves they'd rather bury deep down.
I'm you, your shadow. There's nothing I don't know about you. That's right! Say it again! You're not me! You're nothing like me!
These shadows, when accepted by their counterpart, change to form a persona. It's the wielders of these personas that form our investigation team. The broski klutz Yosuke Hanamura, the high-spirited tomboy Chie Satanaka, the modest-in heiress Yukiko Amagi, misunderstood tough guy Kanji Tatsumi, the charismatic idol Rize Kujigawa, the detective prince Naoto Shirogane, and Teddy. Teddy breaks the pattern, because unlike everyone else, he's not from here. We're introduced to Teddy during our first visit to the TV world, and he serves the primary purpose of giving us a guide to this strange new environment. Now, that's not to say that Teddy doesn't come to the real world, because, yeah.
He's here! This chair is pretty big.
Instead, what I'm trying to say is Teddy plays the role of a side mystery. Throughout the main story, we learn tidbits of information hinting to who or what Teddy is, but it's not until right before the final mystery is solved that we find our answer. Teddy is summoned to the Velvet Room.
This whole time, I've been trying to figure out who I am. I started to wonder why I even exist, and then I finally remembered.
This is the only time in the game we see someone other than the room's attendant within the limousine. And it's here that he decides to tell us that he remembers who he is. He's a shadow. The very thing we've been fighting against throughout the entire game, yet despite learning this, he remains the same old bear we've grown accustomed to. Now, I'm not the biggest Teddy fan, I won't lie to you, but I do find this scene very sweet. When we find Teddy in the Velvet Room, he's just as confused as we are. But it's here he confesses to this imposter syndrome that's overtaken him. He feels that because he's just a shadow, he doesn't belong with us in the real world. The way I've personally interpreted this scene is one of acceptance. We're accepting the truth while rejecting it, because through the events of the story he's overcome being just a shadow into being our friend. Persona 4's story sends you through twist after twist on who the murderer is. Mitsuo confesses and Namatame's caught in the act, but in spite of this things just don't add up. Until the game throws one last curveball your way. Final twist that puts a character you probably suspected the least under the limelight. This curveball is Toru Adachi. Lazy, sleazy, junior detective Adachi. If you've played the game, you know him well, but I'd be shocked if any of you thought on your first playthrough that this cabbage-munching goofball was the true culprit the entire time. See, in his mind, Adachi checked all the requirements for a happy, successful life. He worked hard at school, got good grades, aced the police academy, and this was all his parents ever put value on. But soon he learns that his academic achievements would not be enough to breeze through adulthood. And when a slip-up at work loses him his big city dream, is when we find him transferred to Inaba. The monotonous, unfulfilling jobs given to him out in the boonies lead Adachi to develop this twisted outlook on society. At work he's constantly berated by his partner Dojima, and at home it doesn't get much better for him as Adachi lives a very dull, secluded home life. With the immense pay drop his demotion brought him, we learn that Adachi spends his free time in front of the TV alone with whatever cheap meal he could find that week. Knowing this, it's easy to see the reflections between Adachi and the protagonist. Both characters are shipped off from the city knowing no one but the Dojima family, yet their experiences with Inaba could not be further apart. Adachi refuses to adapt to this new, rural lifestyle, and decides the whole town is beneath him, and makes no effort at all to interact with the community around him. Contrast this with the protagonist's experience, where you are actively encouraged to develop new skills and create new connections through the incredibly well-written social link system. This refusal to connect with others is what I, as well as many others, believe to be Adachi's inevitable downfall. The bonds developed in life play an enormous role in keeping people sane, and it's Adachi's isolation that leads him to form an obsession with one Mayumi Yamane, the first victim The famous reporter caught in a scandal is found hiding out in Inaba's own Amagi Inn, where Adachi would visit to berate her with questions. Questions she would refuse to answer. In an irritated fit of rage, Adachi throws the woman towards a nearby TV, where she falls in. And it's with this where we see the birth of a monster. Now, I've mentioned it briefly throughout the course of this video, but I absolutely adore the social link system. It's one of the main aspects present in every Persona game, and it's what I think makes this franchise so beloved by many. But what is it exactly? It's a system that allows you to gain benefits in battle through spending time with the game's characters, which really helps flesh out the game's cast as well as their day-to-day life. Each character will be available on certain days, and it's up to you on how you spend your free time and who you spend it with. This allows for everyone's experience with a Persona game to be their very own. Once you've decided on who you want to spend your time with, it's as easy as meeting with one of your friends. Just flip out your phone and give them a damn call. This bonus screen time to the game's cast really helps flesh out each character to be more than just a stereotype. From Yosuke's struggle to adjust to Rise realizing her dream wasn't quite what she wanted, this system adds depth to characters that I don't think any other game has ever been able to replicate. And in my opinion, no character has benefited from this system more than Kanji Tatsumi. You see, in any other game, Kanji would be my least favourite of the cast. On paper, he's your stereotypical tough guy, the type of character that has never appealed to me. And for most of my playthrough, this is exactly how he remained. However, all of that changed when I played his social link. Kanji resonates with me in ways no other character really has before. Anytime we hear his name mentioned up to this point, he's described as a troublesome delinquent, constantly up to no good. But is this truly how you imagine a troublesome child to act? I didn't think so. Here we see the big, scary, tough guy we thought we knew rekindle passions he threw away years ago because of the toxic masculinity berated on him by his classmates. Moments like these are scattered across both Kanji's social link and the main story, allowing us to bear witness to Kanji's rediscovery of himself. Speaking of discovery, I basically found a whole new family in this game. The journey to becoming a member of the Dojimas is unironically one of the most tragic yet heartwarming experiences I've ever had the pleasure of going through. From the very beginning of the game, it's obvious that we've been thrown into a family that's been through more than any deserve to go through. The miscommunication between a grieving widower and his lonely daughter is heartbreaking, and it only gets worse the more you get to know them. Ryotaro Dojima, a detective for the local police, buries himself in his work in an attempt for justice and revenge. He believes that what he's doing is for the best of his family, but what he fails to see is the neglected Nanako residing within the household all alone. Through spending time with Dojima, he confides with you, opens up about his deepest fears, and explains that he can't even look at his own daughter because of the memories he's attached to her. It eats him up inside that the one case he can't solve haunts him in his own home. We learn that, before her passing, Nanako's mother would be the one to spend time with her, and now that she's gone, he feels Nanako can't rest until the one responsible has been caught. In reality, what she needs is a strong father to help her understand what she's going through, because the loss of a parent is no easy experience. What Ryotaro fails to see is, through his own grief, he's left his little girl to wander the darkness entirely alone. But this is when the player comes in. Because of this lonely time in her life, Nanako really attaches herself to the protagonist, finally being around someone who'll show her some attention, and by allowing Nanako's happiness to shine, Dojima's eyes are open to what he's been missing out on. With a little push from the player, he finally builds the courage to stop running from his fears, and to enjoy the family he's still got. I spent 3 long years with this game. 3 long years with this team, and although ultimately they're just a line of ones and zeros, I watched them grow over that time. And I feel I grew and discovered a lot about myself right alongside them. I learned what friendship meant and what a real one looked like, and as weird as it is to say, I feel I owe a bit of that to the characters of Persona 4. Every time I'd load back into the game after it'd been a while, I got a weird sense of returning home. And that's a feeling any game will struggle to replicate. My experience with Persona 4 is something I wouldn't trade for the world. And I know I'm not alone in thinking this.